2007 was a pretty unremarkable year for me. At that time, I was a fifth grader who wore his pants up to his nipples and had this haircut. But this year also marked the year when one of my dad's closest friends decided to move to America with his wife and two kids. Moving into America meant a fresh new start for them. But with this move came the fact that they had to let go of most of their belongings, as moving them would cost them a fortune. So they sold what they could sell and gave away the rest. Now they were ready for their journey. But because he was a close friend to my dad, we needed to pay him and his family one last visit. And it went something like, "Ah, we will miss you. Keep in touch. We hope you achieve your dreams." I think. In reality, I don't remember much of that day, or my dad's friend and his family. Yeah, sorry, Dad. But what I still remember about that day is the last moments before we left, when he stopped my dad and gave him a box. "This is for the kids," he said. It was an ordinary box, nothing special about it. Yet here I was, dying to know what's in the box. I rushed to the car to open it, and there it was lying, a Yu-Gi-Oh! Dual Disc and the original Xbox. Sure, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Dual Disc had a missing handle and the Xbox had a broken power supply. But hey, I was $30 away from owning my first real functioning console. Before owning the Xbox, I had a Dell Office Desktop. Yeah, that one. I mean, it was able to run a cracked version of Need for Speed Underground that did not even have music. But the Xbox was a totally new territory for me. It even came with two wireless GameStop controllers and three games: Star Wars Republic Commando and Starfighter, and a broken 2003 FIFA game. Which, to be honest, was a good thing, as FIFA was a shit game before the 7th generation. Then it became a better game and more enjoyable one, until they discovered microtransactions. To which I would like to say, hey, EA, you greedy, games milking, series destroying, money whores, you. Now where were we? Going into the world of real gaming wasn't easy, especially that one game was a first-person shooter with no aim assist, as far as I know. And the other one was Star Wars Starfighter, which took me about 1 year to get past the tutorial mission. And to this day, I can't decide whether I was that bad at gaming at that time, or was the tutorial mission that shit. But despite all of this, I got past the initial learning curve, progressing through Republic Commando. But at the same time, I was only playing one game. The other one shall not be spoken of. This meant that it was time to Can I have a new game? Now at that time, my strategy for picking games was simple. It had two major criteria. 1. A cool game that I played at my cousin's house. 2. A cool box art. This meant a slew of games from big franchises like Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks, Crash to Insanity, and Hitman Blood Money, which by the way I had the controls inverted in it, and young me thought that this was a feature to make the game more challenging. Yeah, stupid. I also played other smaller games like Over the Hedge, which I had a blast playing it with my sister. But after using the Xbox for 2 years, one day I mixed the ins and out of the power supply, and the Xbox started smoking. The Xbox was dead. It was a really sad day for me, but the show must go on. Luckily, 2 months before the Xbox died, I bought my PS2, because it was so fucking hard to even find games for the Xbox where I lived. So now, I have a gaming console that had a much bigger library of games that can be found everywhere for really cheap prices. So I had to stack up on new games, and I opted for the good old box art strategy. And let me just say that it backfired really, really bad. Now being a school kid who relied on his parents' money to get anything going, including this haircut, meant that I had to look for a better way to pick games. And what better place to start than the website that made the Xbox controller, which by the way became a pain in the ass within 1 year, because they won't connect to the fucking console. GameStop. And it didn't take me long to discover that their website is a useless piece of shit that is designed to make you buy as many games as possible. Basically, a big ad. But one day, I stumbled upon a website called IGN, and it opened a whole new world for me. Finally, someone was there to do the heavy lifting for me, providing me with the best games. And the effect of discovering the world of rating started to show its effect during the PS2 era. But this effect took its full shape during the 360 days, as I ditched the book's art theory and now was fully reliant on the rating system. It was an easy, simple concept for me. The higher the number goes, the better the game is. And I have to say that because of this system, I was encouraged to try games that I would have skipped on. Games that were out of my comfort zone or were too obscure for me to pay attention to. And it was because of this system that my love for gaming exploded. But for all the great experiences I was having, an internal conflict was taking place. For a while I worshipped the scores, loved the games they love, and hated what they hate. But I found myself in a situation where I wasn't enjoying the games I was supposed to enjoy. Modern Warfare 3, Assassin's Creed, and Halo 4, just to name a few. But despite all of this, the rating strategy was working well for the most part. So, when I started getting into the world of movies, I relied on it as my go-to strategy, aided with the help of Tomato Meter and Metacritic. I was ready. Or at least, that's what I thought. But what I didn't realize at that time is that movies are reviewed in a different way compared to games. Usually, a lot of the highest rated games every year are the ones with the biggest budget and the ones that appeal to the biggest audience. This can be seen clearly in the list of the highest rated games of all time on Metacritic, which houses some of the most iconic and well-known names in the gaming industry. Now compare that to the list of the highest rated movies of all time, and within seconds, you will probably spot the pattern. Sure, you can find your Godfather, Pinocchio, Pixar movies, and Parasite, but these movies are not the norm. In fact, most of what you can find here are movies that are too old for most people to know about, or modern movies that are too obscure. These movies are what you can call your gold standard of the industry. The movies that are groundbreaking and set the foundation for the modern era, and the ones that can tell a story in an exceptional way. The problem is that these movies tend to be not as accessible to the public as your typical Marvel and DC movies. And if I would describe my first 2 years with these movies, I would describe it as shit. Watching these movies was hard at the start, especially for someone whose history with movies is limited to whatever the shit is on TV before bedtime. Rear Window, Manchester by the Sea, and Apocalypse Now are some of the highest rated movies of all time. Yet my only thought watching them was, my god, when will this end? But as time moved on, I started to enjoy the journey more and more, experiencing a lot of different genres in a time where the box office was dominated by blockbusters, remakes, sequels, and prequels. But as with video games, a lot of the times I would find myself watching movies that are cheered by critics, yet I still couldn't lose myself to their words. In 2020, the pandemic hit, and like a lot of people, I suddenly found myself quarantined at home. It wasn't so bad at the start. Finally, I got some time to do whatever I want. But the thing about staying at home for a very long time is that you tend to get very fucking bored. In fact, I got bored to the point that I decided to watch a rom-com that I stumbled upon on Netflix. Enter To All the Boys I've Loved Before. It's a coming-of-age rom-com with your quirky introverted protagonist who has a crush on a boy. Multiple boy. And a villain who is the white popular douche of the school, who hates the protagonist for no good reason. Basically, it's your typical by-the-number rom-com, with a little sparkle of creativity. Yet for some reason, I really fucking enjoyed it. This movie didn't break any new grounds, yet I found myself connecting with the protagonist, her struggle and journey. But on the other hand, the movie has a rating of 64 on Metacritic, which means it's just a mediocre movie that I shouldn't be enjoying as much as I did. This idea of reviews versus personal experience drove me to think about the situation we are living in, where we reduce the whole experience of what it's like to watch a movie or a series, play a game, or listen to music into numbers and letters. People have huge clashes online over the scores. Just try to open any of IGN reviews and you will find that they have been showered with dislikes for all kinds of reasons. Giving a game a high score, a low score, giving a high score for an annual release, and so on. Which begs the question, how did we reach here? To answer this question, we must go back in time. Hey! It's True Status right here. The best of all guys from all around here. What do? I'm a rapper, an artist, a singer. But best of all of this, I'm the greatest tour guide. Welcome to Greece. Let's start our tour. You're gonna love it in here. People are really cool. And let's start with Alexander the Great. Well, it's not him. It's a staying place where he plans to conquer all of the world, right from Mesopotamia to the Egyptian pharaohs. My me. That was so much rapping for one day. I need a break. Let's go to Starbucks. Yeah, I know, it's generic. But you know that we actually created that shit. Then see people stole it from us. Those f***ing tunas. But moving on, let's continue our tour. I've recharged and I'm ready to roll. Look to your right. It's our grand temple, the best place to have fun and mingle. Today, it's their Friday night where they have their special night. Bands are optional. Oh no, it's happening. It's Aristotle, and he wants to tell you about his book. Run! The Poetic by Aristotle was one of the earliest attempts to critique any kind of art. In his book, he focused on poetry, dramatic theory, and literary theory, which I don't know anything about. But throughout history, people who want to shit on other people's work kept popping up. The medieval era, Arabia, the Renaissance, and so on. This philosophy of dissecting the work of other people and getting to the core of it did not stop on critiquing literature, and there was always that someone who waits for a new form of art to come to the surface. And with the Industrial Revolution and the increasing popularity of a newspaper, it didn't take long for critics to become mainstream. Theater, film, music, and even holy books. Nothing was off limits. And it helped a lot that they were able to adapt easily to fit every new outlet. And with the invention of the internet, things exploded. For the first time ever, they were able to reach people all around the world without the help of the big networks. But with the rise of the internet, the attention span of people fell. Less people were interested to read reviews that seemed like it was ripped from a 12th century book. They wanted a flashier, easier to consume type of media. And someone somewhere thought, hey, let's stick numbers to our reviews. And to say that this idea took off is an understatement. Numbers, letters, stars, you name it. Companies were created around this idea, and for the first time ever, reviews were as important as the type of media that is being reviewed. Here they became one of the determining factors for success. It even reached to the point where the bonuses of some video game developers were connected to the scores. But somewhere down this rabbit hole, things went wrong, and instead of being a secondary part of the review, now the whole review is just a score. And for companies that worked in the review industry, this was great news for them, as the buzz that surrounded their reviews led to more views and clicks, which meant more sponsors and money. But things started to change, as people started to lose their trust in these entities, to the point that their whole mode of work became a meme. And it did not help that their biggest platform, YouTube, started to move away from shorter type of content to focus more on keeping the viewer on their platform. Which brings us to our current situation, where we are witnessing the rise of individuals who are rivaling the big media outlets by using the same platforms that the big media have flourished on several years ago. The Angry Joe Show, Scale Up, and Video Game Donkey are a few of these names who run successful YouTube channels with a diverse library of content. But let's focus on their reviews, which when compared to IGN's seems very similar on the surface, as they pick a piece of media, critique it by discussing the different aspects of it with a slight difference in style, and they end the video with a rating or a conclusion. But if you look beneath the surface, you can start to see a lot of big differences, mainly in the way they approach the media they are reviewing, as they present their raw, unfiltered opinion to their audience, regardless of the general flow of the industry. And add to that the unique character for each one of them, and you have yourself a recipe for how to capture the interest of the viewer. Like take a look at the Death Stranding review for both Joe and IGN, where they both gave the game a similar score, but ended up with a totally different response. And for Donkey and Scale Up, it's a similar story, despite the fact that they have a track record of shitting on some of the most popular games in the industry, like Red Dead Redemption 2 and Cyberpunk. But for their audience, it does not matter. In fact, they would even defend their opinion, because at the end of the day, they are there for their opinion, no matter how ridiculous it is. Now compared to IGN or any of the big media outlets, people are a bit less interested, like the way that they don't really give a shit about the content of the review itself. And it did not help that the big media have been treating reviews the same way for years now, to the point where people became programmed to expect the numbers at the end, which meant that every single review must satisfy their expectations. And if they try to go against the flow and present a different point of view, you can be pretty sure that their review will be shit on everywhere. The comment section, Twitter, Reddit. And if they can remember the name of the poor soul who did the review, well, God help them. Now of course, individual YouTubers have a more loyal fan base than most of the big media outlets, but a lot of the times their hot takes spread to a wider audience, people who are more neutral toward these YouTubers. Yet most of the times, they barely end up with a fraction of the heat. This did not go unnoticed by the big guys, as they felt that they have a big problem on their hands, and they try to do some fixing by making reviews longer and more detailed. But you can't fix all your problems by making things longer. With that said, what can be done? Now the best course of action would be to remove the scores completely. But this will create a bigger chaos, especially if it happens abruptly. So in my opinion, the best course of action is to make a new rating system that uses words instead of numbers, similar to the secondary score for IGN. But rather than having 10 steps on the scale, make them 5 or 6. This way, you can shift the focus of the viewer away from the score and give them an incentive to discover the opinion presented in the review. But more importantly, give your reviewers more creative liberty and let them do their thing. This will help to create a distinct taste for your reviews, which would help people to connect with the reviewers as people who have distinct personality and an opinion to present, not as a name that is slapped at the start of another video in a sea of generically structured reviews. Going through this process will not be easy, as subverting the expectations of people takes a lot of time and effort, but the payoff will be worth it, as people will start to view the reviews as an opinion of people just like them, rather than the creation of a big evil corporation who are afraid of ruining their relationship with the publisher if they criticize their games. This approach to the reviewing process can be applied to any type of media, and one successful example of people who adopted this strategy is Jeremy Jahns, who uses a more generalized rating system, which makes the audience seek to know what his opinion on a certain movie is, rather than rushing to the end for the score. Now, speaking of movies, things there are a bit more complicated. So you can say there are two main types of movie critics. You have your YouTuber/smaller site reviewers who review every movie depending on their genre, talking about what they liked, and didn't like, while not trying to give any movie a high score as long as they've enjoyed it. On the other side of the spectrum, you have your prestigious magazines and the newspaper reviewers who treat every movie like they are their tutor's boyfriend who wants to pick her up for a date. And just like an irresponsible, overprotective father, they terrorize the shit out of them. Just look up any movie you like on Metacritic, and you will find that they have a lot of reviews that shit in them so bad that you don't know if what you have watched is the same movie. Now, this style of reviews is what you can call the best picture strategy, which can be both good and bad at the same time. On one hand, you can get into the nitty-gritty details of what made a certain movie a masterpiece, and critique other movies in a way that will provide a point of reference for all of their shortcomings, which would help the industry to keep innovating and sticking to the highest standards in what they do. On the other hand, most people would look at the New York Times review of Avengers Infinity War and see one thing. That's right, the numbers. Again. So is this the right way to review a movie? Well, yes and no. You see, everyone is entitled to their opinion, whether it's good or almond white. But as with games, I do believe that getting rid of the numbers and replacing them with a simple generalized description of the quality of the movie would make people more curious and intrigued to know the reviewer's opinion. But compared to game reviews, this is not an easy task, as most websites don't have a flashy YouTube channel that hosts their reviews, so instead, they use scores and clickbaity titles to draw the attention of consumers who would have never cared to open their articles, or let alone read it. And add to that the fact that the websites that host these reviews are built around the idea of scores, and you can start to see how this problem runs deep into the core of this industry. Now, speaking of these sites, there are two major ones for movie reviews. The first is Metacritic. Things there are simple. Scores are in numbers, they are summed, and their average is the score for the movie. On the other side of the spectrum, you have Rotten Tomatoes, which I would describe their situation as a fucking shitfest. To put it simply, Rotten Tomatoes works as a hub for movie reviewers from all different kinds of backgrounds, which would be great if they could represent the different points of view in a good way, which would solve one of the biggest problems with Metacritic. But instead, Rotten Tomatoes decided that this does not matter and came up with a new brilliant strategy, which goes something like this. They look at every single review as either black or white. Say you have 100 reviews for a certain movie, 75 of them are positive and the rest are between mixed and negative. Now, Rotten Tomatoes would look at the reviews and slap the movie with a rating of 75. Doesn't matter if the 75 reviews are all perfect or if the 25 reviews represent a valid point of view. Nope. For them, it's just 75% and you can go f*** yourself. And to demonstrate how stupid Rotten Tomato is, I did a comparison between the tomato score and the average critics score. And what better movie to do this than the sequel for the movie that sparked this video, that I didn't know it even existed. To all the boys, BS, I still love you. God damn it, who comes up with these names? Now, To All the Boys has a tomato score of 75%, with 71 reviews from critics. So, I took all the reviews, converted them into a score out of 100, eliminated any review that didn't have a score or its score was in letter, and calculated their average. So I ended up with 32 reviews with an average score of, drumrolls please, 66, an almost 10 points margin compared to the tomato score. Now guaranteed 32 reviews are not a lot, so I took another 3 movies, Bad Boys for Life, Onward, and The Willow Goobies. I don't really know what is this, but let's roll with it. So, here are their tomato scores, and here are their averages. Yeah. So what does this mean? Well, this means that the Rotten Tomato score is a misleading trash that does not represent shit. I would even go out to say that it misrepresents movies and series as something other than their original scores. Now you can argue that Rotten Tomatoes are transparent in their policy toward reviews. They state it on their site. But the problem is that they are hiding the average score in a way that the casual user would miss and just rely on their tomato score. Or in my case, take the score for God knows how many movies manually. This strategy does not sit well with me, as I feel that Rotten Tomatoes are trying to manipulate their audience, especially with the latest update to their website. Now, why would I say that, you ask? Well, I don't know. Maybe because this will make the audience focus solely on their tomato scores, which usually make the score of an average movie or series higher than what it is, which would make it more appealing and justifiable for the average consumer to watch it in cinemas or stream it. And guess what company owns Rotten Tomatoes? But enough with conspiracy theories, and let's focus on another important thing, and that is user reviews. It's impossible for any modern piece of tech to not have them. They are everywhere. App stores, Uber, Amazon, and everything else you can think of. And they usually work fine when the customer actually buys or uses the product. But the thing is, games and movies these days tend to be digital, and the sales of those digital products happen through websites other than the ones that act as central hub for the reviews, which means that they can't confirm if the customer has purchased the product or not, coupled with the fact that there's a big fan base who are always angry for all kinds of reasons, and you have yourself a recipe for disaster. Review bombing, attacking people, death threats, and so much more. But despite this big mess, user reviews are still a good indication of how big the division between the audience and the critics have reached. Just take a look at any game or movie, from big franchises like Star Wars to smaller names like Ninth Gate and Deadly Premonition, to annual releases like FIFA and Call of Duty, which I think by now we are in desperate need for a professional competition to see how bad can you review bomb the shit out of them. This division is not new. Like what you are looking at right now is the trailer for the third highest grossing movie from 1998, Godzilla. Yes, this Godzilla. But what is new to the scene is the widespread of social media, which created a hub for people to come together and express their feelings about everything, including their hate for the game of the year. So, does this mean that critics' opinions are useless? Well, no. You see, the division between the critics and the audience stems from the goal for each one of them. For the user, it's simple. They look for something they enjoy and satisfy their expectations. But for the critics, it's different, as they are there to dissect every part of the movie or game, analyzing and critiquing it. This is important for the industry to keep pushing forward and to help introduce the audience into a more advanced point of view. But when you disregard the original vision, reducing it into numbers, well, you can be pretty sure that the focus of the audience will shift toward those numbers, which will make them pissed rather than intrigued. People are subjective in their nature. That's why having a neutral side, like reviewers, can help to create a more objective point of view. But as long as the focus is on the score, people will keep feeling disconnected, even if there was a solid point of view in there. For them, they get what they wanted, and everything else doesn't matter. But despite all of this, there's a bright side to this story, as the scores were the driving force behind pushing some smaller projects that were unique and different into the attention of the public in a time where it's really hard to break into the scene. The classical way of reviewing things is not going away anytime soon, for better or worse. But with the rise of long commentary style reviews, people are becoming more accustomed to listening to the point of view of others. And as with every trend, the big names will soon jump on board to try their luck. Whether they will succeed or fail is still to be seen. But no matter what score do critics give, or what everyone else thinks, at the end of the day, it's about what do you like. Whether it's 100 years old movie, the newest Marvel superhero flick, or a silly game, it's your call. Except for Nicki Minaj songs. That shit.